What's that like? What's going on, people? Hey, it's a classic rewind version of the What's That Like podcast, and I am your host, John Knowles. Yes, you heard it. Classic rewind. What we're doing is we're reposting an old episode that's related to a new episode. New episode came out this past Saturday with Brad Fiori and Shayne Isbell, the What's That Like Nation's #1 adventurers. In the new episode, you heard them talking about where they kayaked the Florida Keys, they bicycled Vietnam, and they hiked across England. And you can hear all about that in the most recent new episode of the What's That Like podcast. Again, that was released on Saturday, April 4th. The episode we're going to give to you today was originally from August 17th, 2018, and it detailed Brad's journey at the border of the entire United States. So he started in Harpers Ferry, Virginia, went all the way down to South Florida, South Texas, San Diego, up the Pacific coast to Seattle, all the way across the Canadian border to Maine, and then back down to Harpers Ferry. You can hear all about it in this episode coming up. It was the first episode we'd ever done with Brad Fiori. He came on my radar on a page called Mile and a Half. I actually went to high school with Brad. So we reconnected. We did this episode. Again, it was posted in August of 2018, and we want to bring it back to you right now as a companion episode to our latest new episode of the What's That Like podcast. We're going to get you going with that just here in a second. You're going to hear a message from my old producer, Bob Krug. Bobby Krug has his own podcast now called the ATA Network Podcast, all about racing. Here's Bobby Krug, and we'll get you right into the episode. Hope everyone stays safe out there.
Hey guys, what's going on? Producer Bob here, and I wanted to let you guys know that I've started my very own podcast called the ATA Network Podcast. And on my show, we cover all things racing, tech, and a lot more with a variety of guests and co-hosts. Every weekend, we release a brand new episode, and you can check it out on all major podcast platforms like Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and Libsyn by searching for the ATA Network Podcast. You can also find the show on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/ATA Network.
Tell me a little bit about little Brad Fiori growing up. You grew up in Staunton, right?
I grew up in Staunton. Basically the same story as you. Went to high school there, and then got married young, had a couple kids young, worked 30 years. I'm fast forwarding now. Lived in Staunton until I was about 40, and the old divorce comes up. Then most people's lives got divorced. Moved to Bunker Hill for a couple years, and then met this girl, Shayne.
Okay.
And we moved down to Edwardsville, and now we live together. My kids are grown up. They're 29 and 26.
Okay.
Live with Shayne in Edwardsville now.
So the reason you're here is I've been following you on Facebook, and anyone that's listening, you can go out and request to join your group. I got a notice from you one time. You invited me to join the group. It was called Mile and a Half. Is that right?
Yes.
Tell me what that name means, how that got started.
That name got started as me and Shayne were biking and other adventures we had done, hiking and adventures through the last 6 years we've known each other. And we'd always wake up in the morning, Shayne would always be like, "Hey, Brad, how many miles we got to go today?" I'd be like, mile and a half.
So it's your kind of personal thing.
Yes, because she'd always tell me, "Don't tell me how many miles we got to go." Or it'd be mid-afternoon, she'd say, "How many more miles we got to go yet today?" I'd be like, mile and a half. So it was kind of an inside joke between me and her.
And really, it goes back a while. And, you started posting on it to share your adventures. What were some of the adventures you started out with?
Well, I actually opened up mile and a half last year in 2017. We had section hiked before the Appalachian Trail. We did like 250 miles over a couple week period. We thought, man, this is the coolest thing ever. But I'm the kind of person that's got to take it one step forward. I'm like, I'm going to through hike the Appalachian Trail, which is a 4 or 5 month deal. Mm-hmm. So in 2017, quit my job after about 30 years.
Okay. And what did you do?
I was a heavy equipment operator for Republic Services. I only did that for about 27 years, and the other 3 years were. So I did that, and then one day I decided I'm not going to work anymore. I'm going to start living life the way I want to. I wrote down a few things I wanted to do in life before I was decrepit, and most of mine are serious adventures where you basically got to be in pretty good shape. So I thought I would hike the Appalachian Trail.
Before you couldn't.
Yes, before I couldn't. I mean, You're talking 2,200 miles over a 4 to 5 month span. Mm-hmm. And when I flew out to Maine, banger. I met this guy on the internet. He picks people up at the airport and takes them up to around Katahdin, Maine, where Mount Katahdin is. And I was going to southbound it, which is really unusual for people to do. Most people walk the Appalachian Trail northbound.
Okay.
The majority. I guess the insane people walk it southbound.
What's the difference? Seems like you're going downhill.
It's not downhill. Actually, Maine is the hardest state to do.
Okay.
So you're starting at the hardest point and working down, I would say, to the easiest section of it. Well, I get out to Maine. It rains on me every day. I climb Mount Katahdin, no problem. I make it through a place called the 100 Mile Wilderness, no problem. But it rains every day. I come down with trench foot.
Okay, yeah. So your foot's basically in really bad shape.
Yes, my feet are in terrible shape. It was like World War I trench foot.
Right.
So I make it 220 miles, and I got to call it a trip. I got to go home. So that was the end of that adventure. Not that I'm not going to complete it, but it's going to be more of a section type deal than a original through hike. Well, then in the fall, you get anxious. Adventures are not always successful, but you got to try them. So you got to go out and try them. So then I thought, well, you know what? We rode our bikes down the Mississippi River. We did half of the MRT, which is the Mississippi River Trail. We rode from basically Lake Itasca down to Grafton.
Okay. About
5 years ago. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to ride the Missouri River. I'm going to ride my bike up the Missouri River to Three Rivers, Montana. Which sounds insane anyway. So I take off in the fall. And I get up into South Dakota. It's late in the year. It's already snowing in the Front Range of the Rockies. Uh-huh. So that was another failed trip.
Yeah.
So I got to turn around. I get up to Gettysburg, South Dakota. They've got 14, 15 inches of snow in the Front Range of the Rockies already, and I got to turn around. So actually, I called Shayne. I was like, oh, this trip is another disaster. Can you pick me up in Iowa? I'll ride my back to Iowa.
Yeah.
And that was probably a resounding no. Just ride your bike home. I ain't got time to mess with you. So I rode my bike back to Grafton, and she met me there. It was like, every adventure can't be successful.
Yeah.
So after that, we did a little side vacation for ourselves, and then her mom lives in Alaska. We went up there. We did some dog sledding at one of the guy that runs the Iditarod. So we went up there, and then I came home, and I told her, I was like, I just can't sit in the house all winter. I was like, can you take me to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia?
Uh-huh.
She was like, what are you going to do now? I was like, I don't know where this is going to go. And she's like, I ain't got time to take you to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. So I called an old friend by the name of Mike LaRose.
Right.
I called him, and I know he's an entrepreneur. He's got, an independent person that, he works for himself. I was like, he might have enough time. So I call him. He's like, yeah, I'll go. I'll bring you out there. What are you going to do? I don't know. I'm just going to ride down
You didn't
south.
tell anyone what you were attempting.
It kind of gets into a Forrest Gump story, what I was attempting.
Yeah.
Like I rode from... let me finish. I'll get to that.
Okay.
Because it's really Forrest Gump-like.
All right.
So Mike takes me out to Harper's Ferry. From there, we just spent the night, and the next morning you get up, he goes, hey, where are you going? I was like, I don't know. There's really no time limit or, miles to do. I was like... I'm going to leave here. I'll ride out to North Carolina, the Outer Banks, and I'm going to go down to Key West. And he's like, do you want me to pick you up? I was like, don't worry about it. I'll ride my bike back home. He's like, so where are you going after Key West? I was like, well, I might go over to New Orleans, and then I'll ride back up the Mississippi River and finish that trip, and I'll ride back to my house. I said, don't worry about it. I'll be fine.
Okay.
So he left me that morning, and I rode into Virginia on my bicycle.
Yeah.
So I ride my bicycle, and I go across Virginia, and I do get out to the Outer Banks. I guess it takes me 5 days. 4 or 5 days to ride over to across Virginia into the Outer Banks. And really that's where the story really gets going, because I met the first person on the ride there. I met a lady by the name of Pat Hebram Broom.
Okay.
And she's on a site called Warm Showers. It's a cyclist helping our cyclist. If they know you're biking through your area, they're on this Facebook site. So I contacted her. Actually, I think Shayne contacted her for me. And she was kind of leery at first, She's 55 years old, lives by herself in a place called the Money Pit, which is a beautiful home right on the Outer Banks in North Carolina.
Every house out there's got a name.
And this one's called the Money Pit.
Yeah.
And if you've seen what she did to the house, I can see why it was the Money Pit, because it was a disaster, and she totally redid it. But she invited me in her home. And didn't know who I was. I call her. I messaged her on Facebook. Hey, it's Brad. She throws out her address. So here's the address. Go to the house. I'm at work right now. I've shut off the security system, and just make yourself at home. And I go to her house, a beautiful home, and I go in the door, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a total setup. I'm going to get set up for a murder or thievery or something, know. But no, the lady ended up turning out to be a totally nice lady. She took me out to eat that night with some other friends of hers, introduced me to the locals in the Outer Banks. And it was off season. There was nobody there. And a funny story about that, just a week before, they had like 14 inches of snow there.
Now, when is this? What's the date here?
This is like January 19th.
Okay.
So we're talking maybe from the 19th I left through the 24th, 25th of January.
Okay.
And then the Outer Banks, they just had a big snowstorm the week before.
Mm-hmm.
And it all melted within like 5 days. But she showed me pictures of like huge snow drifts on the beach and everything. I was like, hey, lucky me. And, I ran into a lot of luck on the whole trip.
Right.
But I met her, and then the next day I woke up and it was windy and thunderstorms. And I was like, hey, Pat, I hate to do this to you. I don't even know you. Can I spend another day at your house? And she's like, oh, absolutely. Spend another day. Here's the keys to my car. It's in the garage. If you need to go anywhere, drive it. I'm like, is this really happening? Just the kindness of people.
There are nice people out there.
Yes. Yeah. And just let me have free reign of her house. And she came home. I think she had like a dinner engagement that night, and she came home, and the next morning I woke up and was on my way.
So is this the point you decided I am gonna circumnavigate the U.S.?
Oh, absolutely not.
No. So you were still on the Key West, New Orleans, and home plan.
Pretty much so. And to be honest, I told Shayne when I left, she's like, where are you going with this? And I said, if I can do it and time goes good, I'm gonna ride all the way out to Seattle. And then I'll ship my bike home, or somehow I'll get home from Seattle. So there always was the plan of getting to Seattle. Mm-hmm. It was just a matter of how long it would take me, and if I'd quit or not. I did 2 disastrous adventures before this one. So, I was a little leery of confidence in myself to do it. Mm-hmm. It's hard to do solo biking. And to be honest, being on the road, dude, you get lonely. You miss your family, you miss your friends. Right. It's like, man, you meet people every day, but they're just strangers.
And your only link back is you're really checking in via text with Shayne. Or Facebook, right?
Yes, and posting every day. And I didn't want to give it away on Facebook like, hey, I'm going to circumnavigate the United States, because I didn't want to say go to Seattle and then be like, dude, I'm done with this adventure, or wherever I ended up, even New Orleans. So.
Well, at one point it became obvious on your site. That's what you were doing. But when did that really happen?
I think when I really got down to South Padre Island, Texas, I was like, I can do this. I'm cranking out 100-mile days. And you start figuring in your head, the miles left, and cranking out 100-mile days every day. I'm like, I think I can do this. And matter of fact, I think I'm doing this too quick. I'm going to get to Seattle, and it's still going to be winter in the Cascades and the Rockies and across the Great Plains. And that ended up happening. But I think South Padre Island, Texas is where I really realized that, hey, I could do this,
Well, spoiler alert, you did it. And we'll get kind of to the rest of that. Yeah. But tell me about just day to day. So you met somebody through the Warm Showers.
Yes, Warm Showers.
Which is a community.
Yes.
That basically, hey, you need a warm shower and a bed? Come stop by. I got that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That's correct.
So from that standpoint, that worked, how many days? I mean, where did you sleep every day? I mean, was there a mixture of kind of your method?
Yeah, not really. I think I knew when I left, I was like, you know what? I'm a little older. I got a little bit of money. I'm not going to sleep in a tent every night, or underneath a bridge or wherever. I'm going to go to a motel. And that's where Shayne came in really handy. She would explore motels down the line. I would give her just a town. I like, hey, this 100 miles or whatever to this town. And she would research that for me. So when I arrived at that town, I already knew pretty well where I was going to stay that night.
Okay.
And, the part of the trip of that was once I realized I was going to circumnavigate the United States, that was the only thing on my mind, was getting that done. It wasn't about tenting, going, being a tourist and sightseeing. It was just, I'm going to bike 100 miles a day, every day, and I'm going to do this, So that's where it really led once I got to Texas,
What was the toughest challenge about it, though?
The solo hike. I mean, the solo biking.
Yeah.
Just being solo. There was places in West Texas and Arizona. There was nobody. Believe it or not, when you live in Illinois like we do, you're 8 miles, 10 miles from the next town. You get out in West Texas, Arizona, and even parts of
New Mexico.
Eastern California. There's nothing out there. I would wake up in the morning and it'd be, wow, especially West Texas, it's 135 miles to the next town.
So you're going, and you've got to get there.
Yes.
And going the route you did, you're headed into the wind. Am I right?
Well, that would be your thought. But actually, here's where luck comes into play again. All across West Texas, I had an east wind.
Really?
Yeah, it was crazy. I don't know if that's a wintertime thing, that it comes out of the east more. And don't get me wrong, I had to stop in Texas one day because the wind was just too much. I had to stop in, I think it was Sanderson, Texas. I had to stop there for a day. And you need a day of rest anyway. But no, I had east winds coming across at least West Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, until I got to California, which is another story if you want me to tell it.
No, that's what we're here for.
I get to Brawley, California, and got it all mapped out the next day. I'm going to cross the desert. There's a desert section there you got to do. It's about 70 miles long. I get about 40 miles into it. And the wind is coming off the Pacific Coast Mountains, down the mountains. It's blowing like 50 miles an hour
like
in my face.
Santa Ana winds? Is that what
basically, yes. Yeah. It's blowing out of the west, and it's just blowing in my face. I'm out in the middle of the desert. There's no towns. I got a day's worth of water on me and 1 day's worth of food. I'm like, holy shit. What am I going to do? I actually think I called her on the phone, Shayne on the phone. I was like, hey, I'm out like 40 miles in the desert near Brawley, California.
Yeah.
I'm doing like 3 miles an hour on my bicycle. I think she hunted down an RV place for me. She was like, hey, there's an RV place that's up the road. Ended up pulling in there. Believe it or not, here, and I'll say luck a bunch of times. They got a motel there with like 14 rooms in it. So I just pull in there out of the blue. I'm like, hey, cycling across America. I go, you guys got a place to stay? They're like, today's your lucky day. We do. So
really?
I shacked up there for actually 2 days.
Yeah.
The wind was blowing like 50 miles an hour. Shacked up there, and then actually the third day it was supposed to be super windy too. And I was like, I got to get out of here. It starts to wear on you when you just sit there all day and watch TV.
Oh, absolutely.
I could be out biking, And so the next morning I left early in about a 30 mile an hour headwind, and I made it up to Julian, California, which is basically the divide area between the desert and the coastal. Made it to there, and it basically, I hate to say it, but it was all downhill. And the wind stopped. Once you hit the coastal divide in the mountains, it was like a 5 mile an hour headwind, It's in the desert.
So then I guess you took from Southern California, you rode Highway 1 all the way up to Seattle?
Yes, that's another story. I gotta back up a little bit and tell you about the Texas story along the Mexican border. I think it was outside Del Rio, and I really started getting it. Once you get past Del Rio to the west of there, you're really in the West Texas. I'm coming across there, and I would check in with Shayne every morning. I was like, hey, here's my route. I got this road that's like 70 miles long. It looks like a good road, and it was right on the border. Sometimes I was riding right on the border wall.
Really?
Yes. I Google Earthed it the night before, and I was like, oh, it looks like a paved road. I see yellow lines. I get like, I don't know, 25, 30 miles into it, and it turns into a dirt road. Then it turns into a sand road, and I'm like,
sand.
Yes, I'm like, crap. And I still felt I was in good shape because they were doing a lot of fracking down there. So there was a lot of oil field workers. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. A lot of oil field. When you're biking solo, you kind of look around your environment, your area, and you're like, okay, there's a lot of fracker and oil workers here. And that died out in about 10 miles, And then I'm out there by myself. I'm like, oh crap, man, this is total desert. And I always carry a day's worth of water and days worth of food. And then the road kind of died out, and it turned into a swamp. And there was this giant mud hole puddle, swamp, I will call it. I literally had to carry my bike through the woods,
Really?
Carry through the woods to the other side. And then I was biking along. and still on dirt road, and I'm running basically parallel to the Rio Grande River. Finally see like 3 border patrol agents, their cars. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. At least there's some border patrol. These are
There's
somebody,
human beings, yeah.
At least there's somebody out here somewhere. Because you always think of, you always got to like think of an out plan. I'm thinking, okay, if I'm out of water, I'll just sit by their vehicles and wait for them. They'll have water. They'll get me to where I need to go. But I bypass them, and then I go, another 5 or 10 miles. I see another border patrol agent. This one's, in the vehicle. He's coming towards me, and he stops me, and he's like, "Sir, where are you going?" I'm biking around America, circumnavigating the United States. He's like, "Well, we've been following you for about the last 12 miles, and somebody had to come out here and stop you to see what you're doing." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Here's our thought." He goes, "We think you're a drug mule." I'm like, no, I'm just riding. I told him I was from the St. Louis area. He's like, "I got to look at your bags." So I got panniers. I got those 4 panniers on my bike. So he searches all of them and looks through them. He's like, "Well, you're telling the truth." He goes, "You're the only cyclist we've ever seen out here."
No kidding.
I was like, "Well, I'm trying to stay close to the border." And kind of told him the story I told you about the dirt road. I didn't know it was exactly going to be a dirt road. Dude, super nice guy. He had come back later on, about an hour later. I'm still on the same dirt road. He come by and rolled down his window. He's like, "Hey, you need some cold water?" I was like, "Man, I could use a cold water." He goes, "Here's cold water." And the guy was really cool because when we talked originally, he was telling me about migrants crossing the border and not to be out here at night. He hoped I was, through this section by dark. He said, "It's a crazy madhouse here at night." He goes, "During the day, it's quiet, So
wow,
I made it, I made it through that. So
yeah,
that was probably between there and Brawley, California, was the 2 points where I was really, I don't want to say scared, nervous, you get caught out in the desert in a 50-mile-an-hour wind and you're on a bicycle, there's nothing out there.
Right. The theme I'm picking up through a lot of this, and Shayne, I'm looking at you. She's in the room. She didn't want to come on microphone, but I'm asking you a question, so I'm going to ask you to step up and answer it. Okay. It seems to me you were a vital part of this mission control, if you will, to getting through. What's your thought process as he's just off in the wilderness every single day, it seems like?
I was excited for him. I hated that I couldn't be there with him because we do all these adventures together, but I worried about him, but we've done this, so I knew he could totally do it.
And just so every day you're checking in, he's checking in with you, and you're kind of just laying out the provisions ahead of him.
Yes,
right?
Yes. He would check in every morning to let me know what road he's going to be on, how far he thinks he plans on traveling. Then I would get online. I would start looking for hotels. A big thing, I would look for a grocery store or a Dollar General or something so he could just run over there. Once he gets to the hotel, get food. I think that's pretty much it.
Were you tracking him like on an app or?
No. There were times that I like when he's on a dirt road by the border.
When I would call her on a dirt road, and this is out in California in the Salinas River Valley. I call her and I'm actually on a paved road, but I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And I call her. I was like, "Okay, dude, this creepy guy just pulled up alongside of me and asked me if I needed a ride. Okay, I'm on a bicycle, he's in like a Yugo, a little mini car, and he asked me to need a ride. It's a little creepy, so I go, I got to keep in contact with you. The guy took off, but, he's clearly a serial killer."
Yes, those are the times that I worried.
Were there ever any days you didn't check in and you were kind of wondering, or, no signal, anything like that? Doesn't sound like you had any big scares.
No, nothing really big. That was one little incident there, and the other really scary incidents, I guess, were just inner city travel, like East New Orleans.
Oh yeah,
really bad. That's all.
Yeah, I've been through there.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not as bad as it probably looks. Because a lot of it's 13 years since Katrina.
Yeah, and
it looks like it hasn't been touched since.
Yes.
Some of those areas.
Yes. Yeah. And I was riding that day when I called her, and I'm actually backtracking in the trip. When I went to Pensacola, I had to get some work done to my bicycle. So I stopped at a local Trek store and I told the guys my story that were there, really cool guys. And the guy's like, "Hey, you going through New Orleans?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Man, don't go through East New Orleans, man. Solo cyclist, it's just a bad area. So I get close to East New Orleans, and it's already bad before you get there.
Right.
And like you said, the whole Katrina deal, there's just a lot of abandoned houses. And pretty soon I got to just where it was just raw garbage out in the streets, and just nobody around. It
It's
just
sad.
looked like it's
very
an abandoned city. So I called Shayne, and I was like, hey, I'm going to bail on New Orleans. I'm going to go 25 miles south and catch a ferry across the Mississippi River. And then I'm just going to totally bypass the rest of the city. So that's how that part of New Orleans went down.
Yeah. you mentioned your bicycle. You had to get some work done. This happened a couple of times. You had to check in. What did you have to get done along the way? I mean, one set of tires? What?
Along the way, I think I went through 4 rear tires and 3 front tires.
Uh-huh.
I want to call it just preventative maintenance. I didn't want to have any breakdown issues. So, every so many miles, if Shayne would be like, I'd check in the morning and say, hey, you got a Trek store? Or I would call in and like, hey, I'm going to go through Pensacola. Really need to get this done. She's like, hey, I'll check on a Trek store real quick, see if I can find one. She'd give me the address, and I'd just bike there and, whatever. And what happens when you're pulling that much weight on your bike, your chain stretches about every 1,000, 1,200 miles. Man, you can probably get 2,000 out of it. But you know what? You don't want to be out in the desert at 2,000 miles and your chain starts jumping teeth, Yeah. So that's why I call preventive maintenance. I'll pay the $12 and have a new chain put on.
Mm-hmm.
And tires, my tires, I was running with this thing called, they're tubeless tires. The old days, you got tubes in your tires. My tires didn't have any tubes in them.
Okay, so you weren't worried about a blowout running over something?
No, I put this stand sealant in them. And if I could advertise for them, it's probably the best stuff they've ever made. Because I've got nails in my tires. I probably had 4 or 5 nails, and literally just pulled the nails out and just kept on going. And then I don't know if it has a chemical reaction. It would actually like melt the rubber of the tire back together. So on 11,338 mile journey, I didn't have one flat tire, which is amazing.
So you just mentioned the number. Say that again. How many miles did you go?
11,338 miles.
11,338 miles. If I got this right, you tell me. 125 days of biking, and you biked 117 of them? Did I remember that right?
That is correct. 117 of actual biking days.
That's crazy. That's just crazy. I mean, I think about it. So you kind of decided you were going to do this mid-journey, but is this a thing people do? Like, is there a name for it? Tell me about that.
I did a little research before I left. As far as like riding across America from the Atlantic to Pacific or vice versa, thousands of people have done it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say it's a big deal. Ride across America, it's still a big deal. But thousands of people have done it. To circumnavigate the United States by bicycle, I've done research, and it's got to be under 1,000 people.
Yeah.
It's probably in the hundreds.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, you just don't. Well, number one, you wouldn't see them around here.
No,
we're nowhere close. But yeah, you stop and you think about that. It's like that's what I wanted to know. How often do people attempt this? And
I've seen. I'm on a site called bicyclesandbiketouring.com or something. Or on Facebook, they have a Facebook page, and I have seen a few have done it.
Yeah.
And just the research of the internet, man, it's got to be just in the hundreds. Mm-hmm. I mean, don't get me wrong. People probably do it and don't promote it or anything like that. These are people who have, promoted it or had a newspaper clipping about them. I'd say under 1,000, no.
Obviously, you were down at 0 sea level.
Yes.
You're right on the ocean a lot of times.
Yes.
What's the highest elevation you hit?
Yeah, I would say in Stevens Pass, Washington.
Okay.
It was about 5,100 feet.
Yeah.
But you got to, as a guy told me, I met in Montana, and I was like, man, that's not a very high pass. But like you said, you're biking from 0 sea level to 5,000 feet. Mm-hmm. Other passes me and Shayne have crossed have been 11,000 feet, but you're biking from 7,000 feet to 11, which is only a 4,000 feet gain. So from Seattle to Stevens Pass, Washington, you're talking 5,000 feet gain.
Yeah.
So that was probably the highest pass. And I did across the Continental Divide in, I believe, Arizona or New Mexico. It was flat. There was nothing out there. Yeah. It just said Continental Divide.
Well, at that point, it's flat.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about riding up the Pacific Coast Highway.
Going up the Pacific Coast Highway, I come out at Oceanside, California, which is just north of San Diego, by the Marine base at Pendleton. And right off the bat, there's nowhere to ride. You got to get on the I-10 to ride. probably 25 or 30 miles. And the I-10 between San Diego and LA is
Crazy.
Is 12 lanes, 6 lanes in each direction. It's just crazy. And then people must do it because I really didn't get any honks or looks, but it's a wide shoulder. And actually, it's easy to ride because there's so many cars coming back. They create a tailwind for you. It actually blows you down.
Along,
yeah,
huh?
It's like NASCAR racing.
Yeah.
It actually blows you down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that comes out to about Newport, California. You got to get off the interstate there. And then there's some bike trails, and you run up to Huntington Beach.
Newport, Huntington.
Yeah.
Long Beach.
Yep, all those areas. I went right by the port at Long Beach, which is one of the busiest ports in the nation for goods. Went up through there, and then I get to L.A., and that is another experience.
Well, you probably went west side of LAX right into Venice, right?
Yeah, that's where I went. Yeah. But and this is probably my fault for not researching more. I know there's trails that go west of LA and you can get into Venice Beach, but I decided to I'm going to try to be true and stay on the one, California one. And you go underneath the runway at LAX. Yeah, right. That's not a great idea on a bicycle. Oh man, I had a car jam on its brakes because you got to go through the tunnel.
Right.
And
I've been through there.
Yeah, there's no room there. Well, you've been through there. Imagine being there and you're
not on a bicycle. I can't imagine. No.
Imagine you're in your car and you see a guy on a bicycle under there. You're like, this guy is clearly trying to commit suicide underneath the LAX. But no, and actually you get through there. It's only like a 2-mile little stretch. It's busy, and you pop off and you can go right over to Venice Beach, which is bicycle heaven there. And
right.
if you go to my website, the mile and a half, there were some live bands playing down there. Which Venice Beach is. You just got to go there.
Yeah, you got to walk through it.
It's a people watching paradise.
Well, you made it. You went through Malibu, probably got all the way up to Monterey.
Yes, up to there, and then at San Francisco at San Simeon Castle on the California one. There's a giant landslide there. You can't go through there. So
really?
There's you can't go through the Bixby Bridge and that, and come up the south end of San Francisco. So that's where I ended up in the Salinas River Valley. Go through Monterey. Mm-hmm. I go through Monterey. That's right. That's where I popped out of the Salinas River Valley, Monterey, and then I can get back on the one and go up to San Francisco. But there's a funny story there I call the California confusion story. So there's a big storm moving into California over the next couple of days. So I'm on the 101 now, which is more inland. I'm not sure where to quite go. There's a detour. I'm not sure where cyclists are supposed to cycle. So I'm on the 101. I see California Highway Patrol.
The chips are after you.
Yes. Sitting on the ramp. So I come out, stop him. Great guy. Wants to hear my story. Wants to know when I'm writing a book about my story. He's really into it. Great guy. And I was like, hey, so how do you get to San Francisco from here? So I just followed the 101 till I can get back on the one. He's like, absolutely. That's where we want the cyclists to go, is on the 101. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So I ended up going up, spending the night. And I took a day and a half off. Beautiful little town, 300 people. Stayed there, and I get back on the road like 2 days later. And I'm on the 101. I'm thinking, this is going to be great. I'm on the 101, nice shoulder, and the cops pulled me over the California Highway Patrol. Thank you, Chip. And the guy was really a-hole.
Yeah.
He's like, what are you doing on my highway? Well, sir, I talked to the California Highway Patrol. I don't care who you talk to. This is my highway. It's raining. I want you off my highway. We've had calls, about a cyclist on the highway. Really? Oh, yeah. He was mad. He basically told me if I was back on his highway, he was going to arrest me for, trespassing on public property, So, long story short there. So I get off his highway. I got to remap. And at the time in California, I got the Sprint service. My mapping's not working. My Google map is not working exactly right. I can see the main highways and the main roads, but I can't see the inner streets and stuff. So I finally get going. I end up going back out. He told me I need to go back out to the California one. And I know I can't get through. So I go all the way out to California one. It's pouring down rain the whole time. I mean, just pouring cats and dogs on me. I get back out there, California 1, and I get to the detour. It takes you right back out to the 101. So it's like a 19 or 20 mile detour on a bicycle. That's not fun. And I got to cross the coastal mountains 2 times on the way out and on the way back.
Which is it's a half-day journey at this point. Yeah.
Yes, this is turning into a 110-mile biking day for a 60-mile gain, on my journey. But anyway, I'm biking through the coastal mountains. There's no shoulder on the road. It's pouring down rain. Rain's coming down the side of the mountains. I get pulled over again, this time by the county emergency manager. and it's a woman. She pulls me over. She's like, "Sir, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm biking back out to the 101. What are you doing on this road?" "Well, I was told to come onto this road by the California Highway Patrol." And she's like, No. We don't want bicyclists on this road. We want you to stay out on the 101. I was like, "I was on the 101. I got kicked off the 101. No. I gave the lady, the patrol officer's name. His name was Bianco. I was like, "Officer Bianco told me to come down this road." So like I said earlier, I biked like 110 miles that day for like a 60-mile gain, you know.
Go across the Golden Gate?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Videoed it and everything.
Yeah.
I've been to San Francisco a couple times, and it's one of my favorite cities. You know?
Yeah, it's a neat place.
It's a cool place. I mean, you can say what you want, but it's a cool place.
It's awesome.
It's a must-do. I mean, but once you get north of there... and
probably going through there on a bicycle is quicker than by car.
Yes.
The last time I was there was maybe a year and a half ago, I think, and I decided I had to go west. I had to stay, no, not west, east of Oakland, but I was coming out of wine country, and I thought, never driven across the Golden Gate. I'm going to drive across the Golden Gate. As soon as I got across the Golden Gate, it took me 2.5 hours to go 12 miles. Never do it again. So.
And that was one thing I always timed when I got to a major city. I would try to do it early in the morning, and San Francisco happened to be early on a Sunday morning. So it worked out really nice for me. And I didn't go downtown. I just hung to the outskirts and then crossed the Golden Gate and just followed, I believe it was the 101 joins back into the one there again.
Yeah.
But once you get north of that, on the one, it's not the beaches of LA and bikinis and surfer dudes.
It's cold.
It's cold. It's farm country. There's dairy farms, and it's kind of a cool place. And that's probably the most scenic.
Yeah.
Area where the one just runs right up the coast. I mean, you're on cliffs looking down the coast. And that's why on my site I said California was the prettiest state of them all.
Well, that was one of the questions I had. Cool. Yeah. Tell me about some more of the people you met along the way.
I'll tell you a couple funny stories. Shayne looked up on Warm Showers one night. She's like, "Hey, I got this guy and lady in Bradenton, Florida. They'll have you. Stay there." And I bike like 160 miles a day. Super nice people. I go to their house. They live in just a residential area in Bradenton, Florida. Lady fixed me tacos and her husband there. We drink beer, probably get a little drunk, just telling bicycle stories and stuff. But the next morning is when the fun began, because the lady leaves. Her son was leaving for the Coast Guard. She had to get down to the Tampa airport. And the guy's name was Tom. He's like, "Hey, you got anything to do today?" I'm like, "Well, I'm riding my bicycle." He's like, "No, come with me. He goes, I'm going to show you Bradenton. I'm going to show you my boat and stuff like that." And come to find out, my conclusion on Tom was, after we went riding around, he actually wanted me to go out on his boat on a fishing trip with him. He had a couple people coming down. He wanted me, I guess, be his first mate for the day.
You're Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah, Lieutenant Dan.
You went from Forrest Gump to Lieutenant Dan.
He's like, "Man, you come out." And that's one thing I wish I would have done, because we were going to go. He would have took me out fishing all day, and I was like, I was going to make him money. But it would have been a great day off the road. And I was like, "Nah, Tom, I got to get going." But he showed me and was telling me some great stories about in the 80s and drug dealing, and how they went down to the beach one day and there was a Cessna crashed on the beach. It was full of marijuana. Yeah. And how, stuff like how you would just go down to the beach during the 80s. It was coke and marijuana. They were just throwing it out. You'd walk on the beach and find a 50-pound bale of marijuana.
That's what they did. They'd go up north to Bradenton, drop it, and drive it back to Miami, because they never stopped cars going south. They only stopped cars going north. There's a whole documentary on it.
Yeah, and that's where I got the clue on Tom. I was like, I think Tom probably was a pretty handily drug dealer in the 80s, because
importer exporter.
He was in the pharmaceutical business.
He's an importer exporter.
But he was a great guy. I think he actually wanted me to stay a couple of days, and I wish I would have, but I got going. He was telling me also, he's like, "Man, things got so hot here in the 80s, and the feds moved in." He goes, I knew all my friends had went to prison on drug charges. He's like, "So I just packed up one day," and he goes, "I moved to Seattle, and I became a longshoreman for like the next 20 years. And then he had just recently moved back to Bradenton within, I think, the last couple of years." He was a great guy. He had great drug stories.
Good stories, yeah.
But when I was on the Outer Banks, I made a post on the bicycle and bicycle touring site, and a guy by the name of Doug McKinney, who was from Scottsdale, Arizona, he hits me up on Facebook, it says, hey, if I'm ever going through Scottsdale, he's like, stop by my house. Now, I don't know this guy. Finally, I get out to New Mexico, and he sees I'm a few days out from Scottsdale. He hits me up. He's like, hey, I see you're getting close. Are you coming through Scottsdale? I was like, well, absolutely, So I hit him up. Finally I get to Apache Junction, Arizona, which is 30 miles east of Scottsdale. I hit him up. He gives me his address. I was like, it was a Thursday night. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go there on a Friday. Maybe I can stay the weekend, maybe not. But I'm only planning on staying one day. Doug lives in a cool little neighborhood, all desert, He lives in a cool neighborhood. He's out watering his tree. Because he thinks I'm going to come from the left and I'm coming from the right down his street. I was like, I always like to shock people, So I pull up in his driveway. I was like, hey, is that how you effing greet a person? He's like, hey, man. And dude, right off the bat, it was like he was my best friend for like the last 20 years. I mean, he hit it off, and he had his nephew staying there, and his nephew's girlfriend, she couldn't speak a lick of English. His nephew was a professional boxer. And then he also had a girl that was transferring in his company, who was transferring from Seattle down to Phoenix. So he had a house full of people. He takes me all around Scottsdale. We go down to local bars and literally introduces me to all his friends. They're like, so, hey, how long you and Doug been friends? I was like, I just met Doug like 2 hours ago. They're like, no. When you guys know each other? You guys in business together? No, literally, I just met Doug like 2 hours ago. And there's like
Viking brothers.
And Doug's line always was, he was like, hey, this guy rode his bike from West Virginia to Scottsdale to see me, And one day turned into an entire weekend at Doug's house. So Doug actually named the weekend. It was like Lost in Scottsdale.
I do remember that on your Facebook page. You were at a bar, just drinking margaritas or Coronas or something like that. Yeah.
Actually, and Doug was a good guy. He's like, hey, you want to do Mexican? We went to the bar on Saturday afternoon and drank a few beers. And he's like, hey, you hungry for Mexican? And I hate Mexican food. I never eat Mexican. And Doug's like, you do Mexican? I don't want to say no. I was like,
probably not the best idea.
I know. I was like, oh, I love Mexican. So we go to the Mexican restaurant maybe a block away, and there's a line like around the building. And Doug's like, hey, I don't wait in line at this Mexican restaurant. So we go through like the back door, through the kitchen, and just seat ourselves. Doug's like, they'll wait on us, So they just sit down. We get our food. There's people wrapped around the building. I was like, man, is this cool? He's like, dude, I do it all the time. That's the kind of guy Doug was.
He's a local.
He was. And that was old Scottsdale. And, at the time I was in Scottsdale, it was in February. The Cubs were down there.
Spring training.
Spring training. So it was crowded. It was a lot of tourists in town. But Doug was a good guy, and he's the most memorable guy from the trip. Just his charisma, and he was just a funny guy. Yeah. And I still talk to him on the phone to this day. He still calls me, still texts me. He says he's bored. He doesn't have nothing to do now that I'm off the road.
You know what? Correct me if I'm wrong. When you finished, which we'll get to, was he the guy the next day posted, "Where's my daily post?"
Absolutely.
Because you didn't have one out there? Yeah.
That was Doug.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So at some point you did get to Seattle and you took a break, right?
Yes. Got to Seattle like on April 4th. It was too early to cross. As I'm coming across on the ferry, because I actually went up to Port Angeles, Washington, which is the farthest northern point in Washington, where you can take the ferry over to Vancouver. And then I actually came back down to Seattle. You could see the snow in the mountains. They were just full of snow. The Cascades and the Rockies were just bad. And I was watching weather forecast in the Dakotas. It was still snowing. They were having blizzard conditions in April. It was a tough winter. I called Shayne. I was like, hey, what are you doing for the next couple of weeks? She said, I don't know. What are you going to do? I was like, I got to come home. Let's go hike the Appalachian Trail. So she picks me up at the airport. I don't know. What did we take off? A week, maybe? I think we took off a week and hopped in my truck and drove out to Hot Springs, North Carolina. And had a couple she contacted some drivers that drive hikers around the area. So they drove us down to Springer Mountain, Georgia, and just dropped us off there. See you later. You're on your own. So we had hiked, I think 14 days, 255 miles back to our vehicle. If
I remember right, a lot of rain.
Yes, a lot of rain at the beginning. Yeah. Yes. We had to have a few pep talks along the way, I'm good at pep talks when Shayne gets down. You're leaving me? You're going to leave the trail and leave me out here by myself. But the trail provides, though. I mean, I think we had like 2 or 3 days of rain, and Shayne was really down. The next day was sunshine, and your spirits come back up, and the rest of the trip was great. You know, and it's hard to explain the Appalachian Trail. I know we're getting sidetracked here.
We're not,
but the Appalachian Trail, it's such a community of people, just good people from all walks of life. And we've met people we still keep in contact with today. I mean, when we were out there just recently, we're walking with a guy from LA, a younger guy from LA. I think the other guy was from San Diego, and then the other guy was from Springfield, Missouri. And just great people, It's an experience. I highly recommend that too. And I've met some people along the way that were like, you hiked the Appalachian Trail. I always want to do that. I always tell them, like, hey, go out, do 100 miles and see if you like it, because it's just such a community of people. You meet some real characters.
I bet you do. So you did that for 2 weeks.
Yes, did that for 2 weeks. And then I came home, and Shayne actually built a new home. And I promised her, I said, hey, you hike with me for 2 weeks. I'll help you move into your new house.
Man, that sounds like a hell of a deal.
That's
Shayne.
a deal. When you got good help like this.
Walk for 2 weeks and 250 miles. I'll help you move in a card table or
Get
two.
into shape, too.
Yeah. So we did that. We moved into her new house. And then, was it June 1st? Excuse me. She drops me off at the airport, and I fly back into Seattle. And I had left my bike at a bike store in Seattle, a Trek store. So the story there was just another story from the road. So this guy's got this Trek store, and it's a total disaster. It looks like the show Hoarders.
Yeah.
Oh my God. You can't even walk in the store.
Yeah.
There's so much crap laying everywhere. So I think he didn't think I was coming back for my bicycle.
You got a free bike.
Yeah. I think he just got himself a $2,000 bike, and I'm walking across the crosswalk. I take a taxi over to his place, and I tell the taxi cab driver to just drop me off at the corner. I'm walking across. I see him pulling. I think his eyes got as big as 50-cent pieces when he seen me walking across. Because the story is, he didn't do nothing to my bike. I left him a list of 10 things I needed done to my bike, and he wouldn't even let me in the store. He's like, oh man, I was there like at 8 o'clock, and he's like, I don't open up till 9. You can't come in. I think he was trying to hurry up and do a few things to my bike. And he just really, whatever he did, really screwed it. But he didn't do nothing to my bike. I had like listed 10 things. The guy probably could have made $500 off me, did nothing. And to make a long story short there again, I rode, then I just rode. My chain was all messed up. It was jumping teeth, and it was in bad. And I had to climb up the Cascades to get to there, and I had to climb over Stevens Pass. And every time you'd put down pressure on it, it just jumped. It was terrible. So I stopped in Leavenworth, Washington. Shayne looked up a bike store in Leavenworth, and I went there. They corrected everything. I'm not saying they did all 10 things, but great people. And it was kind of a cool bike store because they served beer in the store. Like, you could drink a beer. They had a patio out back. It was pretty late.
Beers and brew.
Yeah, Leavenworth, Washington is a pretty laid back place.
So at this point, you gotta complete the north end, right?
Yep. So I'm gonna ride across the Great Plains. I leave Seattle. I said, I hit into Leavenworth. And once you get through Leavenworth, I mean, you may know it, Eastern Washington is a desert. It's flat, and you come out of the Cascades as a desert. And that was one of the toughest sections. There's just hardly any towns, and the towns are small, and you're just out in the middle of nowhere. And that section there was really tough. And I will say my legs weren't the 100-mile legs I had left Seattle and went home with. So to crank out 100 miles now, like 7 weeks later, it was a lot tougher. But then again, now I'm heading east. And I think I had headwinds the whole way because I think I was bitching about it on the phone to Shayne. That I'm constantly hitting headwinds. But Eastern Washington is a desert, like I said, small towns. And then I come to the Rockies, which is beautiful because I was in Glacier. I mean,
right. Yeah.
I'm on the south end. Actually, I'm on the south end of Glacier.
Great pictures you posted from up there.
That was one. Actually, that compared with California going through Glacier. I mean, you're right up at snow level, and that was really nice. And then I crossed the pass, and I can't remember the name of the pass there, and went into East Glacier. It's just cool. It's just a total different town atmosphere than it is here in Illinois. I mean, the town, like East Glacier is probably 100 people, maybe. And
they've all been there forever.
Yes. And it's all tourism, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there might be 3 motels in town, which was great, and a grocery store. And the prices are a lot higher there. And one thing I did do there was I beat the tourist rush. As far as hotel costs and stuff like that, I really got deals. A lot of times I walked into places, and this goes all the way back to North Carolina. And the whole trip, a lot of times I walked into places, there was nobody there. I'd call her in the morning. She's like, "Is it crowded?" "Oh no, there's 0 cars in the parking lot right now." So I would go in, and they would be like, "Oh, it's $100 a night." I was like, "I ain't doing $100 a night. There's nobody here. I'll do 60." And they're like, "Can you do 65?" "I'll do 65." So it was that way in Montana.
70 if you want ice.
If I could back up just a little Washington story, is I met this guy. I'm biking through Washington. And I know I seen a question on Facebook before I came over here. A guy by the name of Todd asked me a question when there was ever a time I felt like quitting.
Yeah.
And Washington was the state I felt like quitting. I'd say Central Oregon through Washington, it rained every day. I mean, 52 degrees, rained every day. And there's a lot of times I just thought, what the hell am I doing out here biking? I'm 49 years old and I'm riding a bicycle around the country in the pouring down rain. I wonder what everybody else is doing today, I'm riding a bike. But then I would be saying that a lot of the biking is mental. I mean, I would start thinking, what am I doing out here? And I was like, if I wasn't out here, I'd probably be sitting at work on a bulldozer, which is got old too after 30 years. What everybody else is doing. But
that was Todd Roman's question.
Yes, Todd Roman. Yeah.
So Todd wanted to know if you ever wanted to quit. There you go.
Actually, the thought did run through my head after being rained on. I don't know, 10 days, 7 days. It just rained every day, and I was like, man, if I get to Washington, maybe I'll just ship my bike home. But then another part told me, I'm like, man, I'm 3/4 of the way there. I've got about 4,000 more miles to go, which is a lot, don't get me wrong. But that would be the state it just rained every day. And, there was a time I was sitting at the gas station. I called Shayne to check in, because I check in at least 2 times a day. So how's your day going? I was like, it's raining. Where are you at? And I would think I was in Andover, Washington, or I can't remember. Aberdeen, Washington. I'm sitting at a gas station. School was in, and all the school kids were coming in there. I'm sitting at like a Quick Trip, wet as shit. And she's like, how's your day going? It's raining. It's raining again. How many more miles? I got about 50 more miles of rain to go.
Oh boy.
But no, I actually checked in at a Quick Mart one day, and the lady's like, man, there was another cyclist through here 3 days ago. And I was telling her my story. And she goes, he's about 3 days ahead of you. Maybe you can catch him and ride with him. I was like, you think your mind works weird things when you're by yourself. I was like, well, maybe I can catch him. I'm doing 100 miles a day. He's probably doing 60. So like 3 days later, I'm biking near Astoria, Oregon. I'm just starting up this hill, and I'm like, holy crap.
There's a bike.
There's a biker. I hadn't seen a bicyclist, like a long distance bicyclist, probably since West Texas, I believe. I see this guy, same setup as me, pannier bags. And I'm like, I'm going to catch him. I can catch him on this thing, because I can tell he's going slow.
Yeah.
For 3 days earlier. I finally catch him, and his name's Austin. I'm like, hey man, were you back at the gas station? He don't know what I'm talking about. He's like, I'm just a local guy. I'm just out bicycling today. I'm like, oh man, I thought you were the guy from the gas. Total disappointment for me. But the guy turned out to be a totally cool guy. And I say this all the time. He wants to hear my story. What am I doing?
Yeah.
Well, he's out training because he's going to do this brewery tour around the ice. Same setup as I'm doing, but he's going to throw in some train rides and some other stuff. So it's not, I want to say, as authentic as mine.
Did you get to the point where anybody stopped you and you got to some small town and they took a picture and they put you in the newspaper, or crazy man comes through town?
Never.
No?
Never. That never happened. Which is weird, because I see other people's posts where they're just riding across country. That happens. I'm riding around the country. It never happened. Don't get me wrong. When I'd go to I'd always stop at a gas station for my break. My big thing was a Monster drink a day. Mm-hmm. And believe me, that stuff works. It really gives you a lot of energy. Yeah. But it wasn't a day went by that people didn't come up to me, hey, what are you doing? Most of them walked away, like that. That's crazy. That's the most insane thing I ever heard. Or, don't you have a job?
That is a question I had. So Lee Dow actually asked on the post. Basically, we put out on Facebook if you had any questions. How did you afford all this? Did you total up what this cost you?
Yes, I did. Do you want to give me the amount?
I think America wants to know.
It roughly cost me about $14,000
Yeah.
to do it all. That was food, bicycle repairs, lodging, the whole thing. About $14,000.
Worth every penny?
Worth every penny. I wouldn't take it back. I mean, here's what you can do. You can hold your money and die on it, or you can live with it.
Yeah.
You know, I would. That's the whole reason I quit my job. It was time to start living. I hear people all the time say, "I'm going to work till I'm 62. When I'm 62, that's when I'm going to start traveling." Or 65. Some people are even up to 70 now.
Yeah.
What are you going to do then? You going to bike around America then? I mean, most people, they don't have that insane ideal to do that.
Right.
But in my insane mind, that was something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to bike across America. It just turned into something bigger.
Absolutely did. What was your longest ride? What was the longest daily mileage you put in?
171, I think.
171. And the shortest probably came because something popped up, right?
Yeah, the wind in Minnesota.
Yeah.
28 was the shortest, and that was in Minnesota.
Somewhere up
Somewhere in North Dakota before you cross over into Minnesota.
Yeah.
I actually did like 144 miles the day before. I should have took a day off. I crossed over into Minnesota. It was blowing like 30-mile-an-hour headwind, and I called Shayne. I was like, "Oh, dude, I got to bail on today. It ain't going to happen."
Yeah.
And she looked up a hotel. She's like, "Hey, there's a place right here. It's like 6 miles up the road." And that's where Brad stayed the rest of the day. It was right by Walmart, so it was great.
Yeah.
Because on days off like that, which I would call to have days off, it was nothing for me to eat probably like 15,000 calories.
Really?
In a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nothing was healthy.
So let's talk about that a little bit. You mentioned a couple times you always had enough water.
Yes.
Or days worth of water, days worth of food.
Yes.
So on your journey, what did your bike weigh when you're doing this?
I think it weighed, my gear was about 35 pounds, and my bike itself, I think, weighs about 18. So,
And what do you weigh?
I weigh about 180.
Okay. North of 200 pounds. You're carrying this the whole time. What gear did you have? What did you travel with?
Well, I did stay in motels, but I had a tent just in case. You know, I did sleep under a couple bridges. I don't think I actually broke the tent out one time, but I did sleep under a few bridges. I slept at a place in Newport, California. It was like a rowers club. Uh-huh. There was nobody there, so I just crashed underneath one of their sheds one night. But no, I carried a tent just in case. I mean, you never know. You get out in the Great Plains and there's 70, 80 miles between town. You start hitting wind, you're just going to have to camp it. Change of clothes, you know, just standard stuff. You know, I carried an extra tire, a couple extra tubes, but going tubeless like I did, you got to have high pressure to blow those tires back up. So there's no, like, if you get a flat, we'll just pump it back. You got to take the whole thing off, insert a tube in it. So I had a couple tubes, a tire, some tools, a tent, extra clothes, a sleeping bag, you know, an air mat. It's just same stuff I would carry hiking, which probably totaled it up to about 35 pounds.
Doing laundry every day? Once a week?
Absolutely not.
How'd you smell?
I probably walked into places and people were like, "Oh, dude, we got to get this guy out of here." I'm not a big laundry dude. I'll tell you, on the whole tour, I don't think I ever went to a laundromat. I'm really good at like bathtub laundry. Like maybe 2 or 3 days out, I would just throw my stuff in a bathtub.
You didn't come home with a Forrest Gump beard, did you?
No. I'm a shaver. I can't grow a beard. You know, it just starts bothering me. But I would do bathtub laundry. You would come in my hotel room at night. I'd have like everything stretched out on like third or fourth day laundry. Everything would be hanging everywhere. I'm like, you know, after 100 miles cycling a day, I didn't feel like going to laundromat. It was like I would go to Dollar General or Walmart, whatever close, grab food, and it was just pack on the calories and watch TV, basically, and post on my site. Yeah. You know, I tried to answer all the questions. If anybody had questions or, you know, whatever, I tried to answer.
Yeah, you were very active on social media throughout the whole thing. So if you were doing, what was your average daily?
96 miles.
96 miles?
Yes.
Call it 100. So you're biking 100 miles a day. You're probably rolling, 15 miles an hour with that setup?
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah, good day.
So how many hours is that? You're talking like 6.5, 8?
Oh, I would. At the end there, I've started taking some pretty good sized breaks. But at the beginning, there was days. in West Texas and stuff, I wouldn't even stop. I mean, because there was no place to stop. So I'd probably do about 8 or 10 hours a day biking. Towards the end, it was 8 or 10 hours, but you'd probably throw in an hour and a half of breaks off that 8 or 10 hours.
Okay.
Because the towns were closer. Once you get to the East Coast, there's a town every
Well, you're
10
clicking them
miles.
off. You feel like you're accomplishing something a little bit later, too.
You know, back to Todd's question, I hate to say it, but in New York, it just seemed like I was never going to get through New York. I'm like, I would look ahead and say, like, okay, I'm going to be in Vermont, then I'm going to be in Gorham, New Hampshire. And those days would never come. You know, I was in New York. I was like, I'm never going to get out of New York. Because I was going across the wider northern section. And
east to west of part of New York.
Yes. And New York is...
West to east, actually, in your case.
Yes.
Yeah.
And New York is very hilly, and it's just rolling hills, you know.
There was one day you like knocked out 2 or 3 states in a day, though, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think that probably was once I left there was a couple of times, like I left New York. I think I biked all the way across Vermont and almost all the way across New Hampshire to Gorham, which is basically probably 30 miles from Maine.
Yeah, I don't know. You had a series of posts, and it was just all by the state line signs. Like, is this all one day?
One of those was a little deceiving. I think I came out of Maine, and I hit just a little corner of Connecticut. I mean, really, like probably 5 miles. Probably exaggerated that.
It counts.
I know. I probably did like 5 or 10 miles in Connecticut and was right into Massachusetts. But that was the toughest day riding. I will say that. It was across from Massachusetts. I don't know if it's because I wanted to get done. I don't want to say I was done with the trip, but I knew it was close within 4 or 5 days. But I biked from the coast of Massachusetts, maybe the suburbs of Boston, all the way to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which is on the western side. Yeah. And you got to go across the Berkshire Mountains, which they're not the Rockies, but I came into a stretch. It was like a 20-mile climb. It was just, it's just one of those days where you want to throw your bike down and kick it, you know? Yeah. It was just a constant 20-mile climb. And that day was really hot. It was probably in the mid-90s. And it was the thing about the East Coast when I was there. They were having one of the hottest years they had. Yeah, it was up in the mid-90s with just terrible humidity. So you got to stop more for water.
You come out of New York, you're down through Philly, Delaware.
No, I skipped that. That was always my go, and some people on another site gave me some crap about not going to keep to the coast, like go through Boston, New York City. But it's my trip. I'll do what I want. No, it's a heavy populated area. I mean, how many people live in Boston, New York?
Percentage-wise,
Philly?
You didn't lose that many miles, I'm sure.
No, I did. I like to explain. I did like a half moon around Boston, New York. I stayed as close to them as I could, but I came to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and then I went down to Poughkeepsie, New York, which is just up the Hudson from New York City. Yeah. It's actually by West Point. I think the sign said 10 or 12 miles from West Point, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then I went down through Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Gettysburg, and then that took me back to Harper's Ferry, which is right by D.C. Yeah. I mean, it's not that. It's kind of a half moon around there.
So what day did you finish? It was June.
I couldn't even tell you. I can tell you what I
Calendar's been irrelevant for you.
Yes. Yeah. That is true, because there's many days along the trip I'd be like, what day is it?
Well, I know
Tuesday.
I know personally, and I know I'm not the only one. A lot of people on your Facebook page were kind of anticipating you counting down. And one of the coolest things you posted was your last 500 feet?
Yes.
Where you rode it right back into the hotel where you got dropped off, right?
Yes.
That was cool. So if you want to go to mile and a half, you could see that. Brad, what kept you going? I mean, you're rocking out 100 miles a day. You said biking is mostly mental. It's a lot of time with wind in your ears.
I'll be honest, on the first half of the trip to Seattle, I would listen to music occasionally. Mm-hmm. On the second half, I never listened to nothing. I hate to sound Forrest Gump, I just rode. Rode the bike. But you have a lot of time to think out there and solve world problems. And, a lot of days I just took in the scenery, like out in Montana, and even North Dakota, just a lot of places, I mean, there was just beauty out there everywhere across America. I mean, it was pretty impressive.
Little quiz for you. Top 3 coolest things you saw along the way.
Top 3. I tell you what, I was up in Wisconsin. I can't give you the name of the town, and actually seen a guy unloading his garbage into like a public dumpster. And I seen a sign. I just had to look over there, and I was like, what's that guy up to? And I seen a sign, and I was like, oh man, look, I'll go over there and look at it. And it was the best World War II ace that ever had come out of that little town.
Uh-huh.
And you can go to my page and see the story on it.
Yeah, I remember it.
But, yeah. And that was really cool. I'm like, man, that was like, I was looking at the guy with the garbage and there's that. And actually I went over and I talked to the guy dumping the garbage there. And dude, he told me the whole story about how his plane used to be in town and he would be the parade marshal every year at the 4th of July parade.
Yeah.
And he's recently, he passed away. But I had posted that. And then my friend Darren Hanner, I guess he looked it up and he's like, man, you are right. That guy is the ace of aces.
And you had a lot of history posted on it.
I'm a big history buff, And I'd say the California coast is just car, motorcycle, bicycle, however you want to do it. Really the coast up through Oregon. And I wish it wouldn't have rained in Washington as much because the Olympic National Park is probably beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It was raining. On to that number 3, I'll put Williston, North Dakota. It's a boom town. It's a fracking oil town.
Mm-hmm.
And I had met a couple guys in Haverty, Montana. And they were like, hey, where are you going? Again, told them my story. And they're like, man, don't go through Williston, North Dakota. Well, telling me not to go through that means I'm riding through there because there's clearly something there I need to see, So, and I've been a couple of long distance cycles. They're like, oh, don't go. It's fracking and the semis and the oil industry. Like, okay, I'm going now. So I get to Williston, and it's a modern day boom town. It's just oil wells everywhere. You see the old town of Williston, and then it's all modern. You got your Buffalo Wild Wings, your Applebee's. It's all modern, and there's probably, and I'm just seeing a narrow strip of it. Yeah. I'm focused on riding across it. I'm not there to see the whole town. It was really cool to see the fracking, the modern boom town. They had 3 large encampments there, I would say like military base encampments
really?
Almost, where they housed the workers. And it just wasn't in Williston. It went all the way to Minot, the oil fields.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was like a modern day gold rush.
Yeah.
It was just impressive. And the housing, you'd have the old farm towns, which were probably a couple hundred people. And here you got all these new subdivisions going up. The roads are all brand new, and there's oil wells everywhere. It's impressive. If you could ride through there just if you're heading out that way, I would go through Williston just to see how fracking has changed that part of North Dakota. It's really cool. I was impressed. Even along the road, you could see how they were loading the rail cars. We probably see them come by here, loaded with oil. I'm not sure they're coming from North Dakota,
right?
But it's
really
impressive.
The pipeline through here now that went all the way up there that caused all that controversy.
Yeah. And that's where it's coming from. And you can see the tank farms where they store all the oil and probably pumping them into the pipeline. They probably go right down here to Wood River without a doubt.
125 days, 117 cycling, 11,000.
332 miles. I think it's 338. I forget now.
It's still amazing.
Yeah.
What's next?
Here soon, about 10 weeks, we're going to take, I own a couple sea kayaks.
Yeah.
And we're going to take our kayaks down to the Florida Keys. And we're going to kayak the Florida Keys. Yeah, it'll be over 100-mile journey. Just camp on our own island, just as primitive as we can do it. Basically load up our hiking gear in our kayaks, and we're going to kayak from just the Florida Keys all the way down around Key West and then come back. Probably take us a couple weeks doing that. And going to Vietnam.
Really?
We're going to go to Vietnam. This is the way me and Shayne like to do it. It's like the Anthony Bourdain no reservation thing.
Right.
We don't like to make any reservations. We don't like to go with tour groups. We're just basically buying a ticket to Vietnam. We'll apply for visas. You got to apply for a visa in Vietnam. And we're just going to land in Ho Chi Minh City.
And figure it out.
Go buy a couple bicycles and 2 backpacks, and we're going to bike to Hanoi. And then we'll fly back from Hanoi. It's probably a little over 1,000 miles.
Yeah. When are you doing that?
That'll be in February. That's supposed to be the non-rainy season.
Where else have you been?
Oh my God, we've been, me and Shayne, we biked Iceland. Same thing. We actually flew our bikes to Iceland. Contacted a bike store there. They put them together for us. And we did it's called Route 1, the Ring Road. It took us 2 weeks to do like 900 miles. But that was more of it was a biking trip, but we also sightseed. And we camped. I mean, we stayed at a hostel once, maybe a couple hotels over that 2 weeks, but it was basically just tented next to a glacier, just tented anywhere we could find to put up our tent, which was kind of hard sometimes. But we did that, and it rains on you. It's people see the videos and they see my picture and they're like, oh, that's cool, but there's a lot of hardship going that. I've trained for years to do this. And Shayne trains for years too to do this stuff. She has a job, so she's a little less dedicated than me.
What are you doing now? You've been back for 6 weeks.
I don't do nothing. You know what I do? I plan the next adventure. That's it. No, I worked for 30 years. I don't want anybody to think I'm a bum and hey, this guy just does this. I worked for 30 years, and I tell you, before I quit, I made a list in my head. I want to do this, this, and this, and I've just slowly been checking them off the list.
Yeah.
Is
there still like a ultimate thing that you've got there, a carrot that you're going for?
This one was it. To bike, like I said, it was to bike across country was my big one. There's some other things I've got in mind. Definitely Vietnam's one of them. The Pacific Crest Trail, it's going to have to wait, which is maybe the sister trail of the Appalachian Trail. There's 3 big trails in the United States. I got to finish the Appalachian Trail first. That may come next summer. I'm about 700 miles into it, and anybody that listens to this, a hiker, is going to say, "Oh, dude, he's only got 700 miles. I hiked it straight through." He's a loser. But you know what? Not like I said, all adventures don't work out the way you expect them to work out. There is failure.
Any more crazy stories from the road before I let you go?
I got 2 that I'll let you go. The guy I ran into in near Astoria, Oregon. I told you I caught him.
Astoria, Oregon's where the Goonies was, right?
Yeah, Astoria, Oregon. He called it the Little San Francisco. The Little San Francisco. It was pretty cool. But I run into the guy, and he's like I said, he was doing the same thing I was doing, but by using train and cycling combined. And find out he's a brewer in Astoria, Oregon, this little brewery. So we ride together for like 40 miles, and we're talking. And we come down to where it was just a crossroads. Either I'm going to go over into Washington across the bridge, or, and he's like, "Hey, you want to tour my brewery?" I'm like, "Okay, I will." I go, "Here's the deal, though. I need a place to stay tonight. If I could stay at your house for free, I'll hang out with you the rest of the day."
Great deal.
Yeah. He's like, "Oh, no problem, man." So he lives on this house, and Astoria is very hilly. So we got to climb this huge hill. So we go at this house, and it had been raining on us all day long. I was like, "Hey, can I use your jar?" So we both take a shower, not together. And use a jar, dry the clothes and stuff like that. And I was like, "Hey, we taking your car down to the brewery?" He's like, "I don't own a car. We're going to have to ride our bikes down there." I'm like, "Okay." So anyway, we ride our bikes down to the brewery. It was just so cool. He knew everybody down at the brewery. I think he was like their master brewer because he knew all the brewery recipes. And literally got to taste the beer out of the giant stainless steel tanks and showed me how they can it. It's not like Anheuser-Busch where they're canning 14 million cans of beer. They're probably canning 1,000 cans a day or something. Yeah. But that was a cool story. And the only other one I found weird, I was riding out in New Mexico one day, and I see this guy in this wheelchair, and I'm old guy, and I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm riding to Mexico. I look over and I'm like, okay, that guy's not wearing any pants, and he's in a wheelchair. He was naked from the waist down. I mean, this is stuff you see riding your bike. I'm like, okay, I don't know where he came from. I mean, there was no houses, no down. He's just in a wheelchair on the side of the road, not wearing any pants. It's just funny.
If you can get away with it,
I guess so. I mean, there you could. There was nobody out there.
That's crazy. So, one last challenge, maybe. Have you ever ridden the world famous Tour de Donut?
Yes, I have. I'm like a 4-time Tour de Donut person.
Yeah?
I'll tell you a funny story about that. I've been riding.
Producer Bob here, he's done the Tour de Donut 4 times. That puts you guys on an even keel, right, Bob?
Not for the first time this entire podcast.
Yeah. What's funny about the Tour de Donut? My nephew Brandon was telling me he was a volunteer there. And I haven't rode it in many years. I think we did the 25th anniversary. We did the 25th anniversary, I think was the last one we did. But a couple years before that I rode, and I was on a mountain bike. And I've been riding since like 98. I really picked it up over the last 10 years of like crazy riding. But I was riding on a mountain bike, and I was literally like behind the sprinters, and I not the front group of 150 people that are really hardcore, but I wasn't far behind them. I was beating people on regular road bikes, and I'm riding this mountain bike just like the Wicked Witch of the West. And my nephew Brandon's like, he was a volunteer for one of the stop signs, and later on, I guess a couple of days later, he goes, "Man, you you were the first and only mountain bike we've seen. You were like definitely leading the mountain bike category by a long ways. And I think that might even been when they went through Warden, the other way, went through Madison County.
Yeah, they come through here now.
Yeah, which is great.
Mount Olive. Yeah, it's good for the town. It's a lot of fun. We cover it on the podcast. And
I see the podcast.
Yeah, we like Bob did his kind of in-race reporter. I handled it from this end. Did you suffer any soreness, injury, anything that really hit you that was like maybe slowing you down health-wise the entire time?
No, which is kind of crazy. When I first started, there was some muscle soreness. I haven't taken a leave here and there, but the second half, it was just all biking. I only had one breakdown on the bike. I broke a pedal shaft one day. Mm-hmm. And actually, I had stopped at a bike store to get a chain fix and a tire problem I was having in Fort Bragg. Next day, I had to stay in Fort Bragg for like a day and a half. I was waiting on a part. And I head out of there first thing in the morning, bright and early. I get like a mile out of town. I go to crank down, my pedal shaft breaks off the drivetrain. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, shit. And then I'm like, oh, hey, wait a minute. This is a good thing. I'm only a mile from town. I'll just walk my bike back. And the guy was totally cool. And actually, I think he broke the nut that goes on there. It was just a thin piece of aluminum. So that was the only breakdown I had.
Really?
And that was one of my biggest worries. I hate to bring up West Texas again. When you get out there, you're going to either do some hitchhiking or you're going to do a lot of walking.
Yeah.
And I don't want to keep you, but I did meet a lot of, not a lot, but I met a few people walking across the country, like walking, doing the same thing I'm doing, but they're walking. And then when I was out east, I met three characters walking up the East Coast. They were walking from Key West to Fort Kent, Maine.
Yeah.
There's like three, you see all kind of people, And I ran into, I tell you a funny story. I rode by Mar-a-Lago, where Trump is.
Yeah.
He was there the day I rode by there. So I'm coming up to Mar-a-Lago from, I believe it was the east. And I see this barricade there with some police officers, and they're like, hey, where are you going? I'm just going to go down the highway here. Nah. President's at Mar-a-Lago. You're going to have to go around, which is actually a great thing because they took me around the other way, and I really got to see the layers of security.
Really?
Just to get there, because I came to the bridge and went over to where Mar-a-Lago is, and it had like county sheriffs, and they stopped me. Where are you going? Hey, biking around the country. Okay, but hey, when you get that stop sign, you got to take a right. You can't go by Mar-a-Lago. Well, then the second layer was like state police mixed in with the Secret Service. They just stop. Where are you going? Going around the country. Okay, you got to turn, But the third layer was Secret Service, and they had, it was like all the Suburbans you see in the movies, or even on the news, all of the Suburbans were there, darked out.
Yeah.
And off to the side, they were randomly pulling off cars. They had like an X-ray booth off to the side. It was pretty cool. It's not something you don't see every day. And I think Trump had a big, huge American flag flying over Mar-a-Lago. It's like 50 foot, which is, whatever. And then I had to turn. Actually, that was all the closer I got. And then I had to turn. But that was something you don't see every day.
Well, I think we got a great question here to end this on.
Great.
All right. And your friend Tammy Garrett Cottage.
Yes.
Wants to know how many pairs of underwear did you go through on this entire trip?
I don't wear underwear.
There you go. Brad Fiori, mile and a half on Facebook.
Yes.
So you can go there, you join the group, kind of follow along with his adventures, and I'm sure any future adventures that you and Shayne have.
Absolutely. I'd love it. If we go to Vietnam, we're going to Vietnam. I'd love to have us back if you want to do another interview.
You're welcome anytime, my friend. You just got to come back. That's kind of the problem. That's the kind of the key as we end here. I mean, really, I remember contacting you and I said, do you want to come on the show before you finished? And what did you say?
I said, well, let me finish first. I don't want to feel like a loser.
And you're not, Brad. You're certainly not. Hey, I want to thank you. I want to thank Shayne for coming over and coming on the What's That Like podcast. We've gone plenty of time, and I want to thank you for taking time out. And anytime you guys go off and do something crazy, I want to know what it's like and come right back here to the What's That Like podcast. Fair enough?
Yes. We thank you, John, for having it. It's been great. I've enjoyed myself thoroughly.
Well, it's a document you can use. And certainly, when it's done, the friends that want to know all about this, feel free to share. And it's there for all time. It really will be.
Yes.
You can
cool.
always look back on this as the documentation of what you've done. The What's That Like podcast serves you as well.
Yes, and you're on mile and a half. You see us out doing something crazy, and you're like, man, I want to hear the stories. Just have us back. We'll come back anytime. I know where you live now. I'm not lost in Mount Olive.
You've been to the illustrious Studio 312. So
perfect.
Thanks a lot, Brad. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. That was Brad talking about that amazing journey he did on bicycle. Another couple days, we'll post the next episode, the third part of the Brad Fiori and Shayne Isbell trilogy. That will get posted here in a couple days, where they hiked. At least Brad finished it. Shayne got most of it. The Appalachian Trail, another awesome adventure, another awesome story, and something a lot of you have heard about but never probably done. You can hear all about it right here on the What's That Like podcast. Hope you're well out there. I know it's tough times during this COVID-19 crisis. Stay safe, stay well, stay separated. Wash your hands. We love you. Peace out. What's That Like is available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Search for What's That Like. Subscribe today and never miss an episode. Streaming is available at SoundCloud.com and on the SoundCloud app. Follow What's That Like at Facebook.com/What's That Like Podcast and on Twitter at What's That Like Pod. All opinions of the guests of the What's That Like podcast are their own, not necessarily the views of the host or the podcast producers. We hope you enjoy this podcast serving Central Illinois and beyond. Peace out!